Dr. Mero with a question, I think a good question that I hear and I've read from many perspectives. And is a calorie a calorie? Well, that might seem a little strange of a question, but is there a difference between carbohydrates and fat, right? Are carbs really evil, right? These arguments come about because at the heart of it is a calorie really a calorie? Is it really about calories in, calories out for weight loss or weight gain or whatever it may be? Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that may be supported in this idea and maybe some of the things that are not, depending on what side you are. Okay, so if you're a calorie person, or you're like, no, calories aren't a calorie person, well, there's, like most things, without getting to a logical fallacy, like most things, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. If you haven't already, by the way, subscribe to my channel, leave a like after looking at this video, and of course, leave a comment if you have one. Okay, so let's talk about each macro. This will be easier to talk about in that way. So fat, let's start with fat. Fat has 9 grams or 9 calories per gram of fat. So saturated fat, unsaturated fat. Many people avoid saturated fat, rightly so, because it's linked as a heart disease. But here's the deal that I talk about. Some people say, well, I don't want to eat saturated fat. Well, saturated fat oftentimes can provide that satisfying feeling of eating. It promotes satiation, right? It provides better satiety. Would it be better to consume a couple pieces of cheese that are higher in saturated fat, or overconsume later because you didn't consume the cheese, a bag of some, nutrient dense or nutrient less, right, and energy dense carbohydrate source? Okay, it might be better to eat the cheese, right? It's like, well, I don't want to eat this fatty hamburger because if I do, then I'm gonna get fat. But then you don't eat the fatty hamburger and you just eat some lettuce or something, and later on you binge in the pantry because you didn't have that hamburger. Okay, you weren't satisfied with your meal. So when we look at balancing as a calorie, when in terms of fat, yeah, it's 9 calories per gram, period. But the feeling you get from it, how you feel about the food and how much satisfaction you derive from it needs to be taken into account. I'm not advocating eating a block of cheese. What I am saying, though, is cutting our diets down to a point where they're no longer satisfying can cause problems, and eventually willpower loses and you end up binging on some lower quality food. Okay, so it's, fat has probably of this argument, in my opinion, has the least impact. But when it comes to saturated versus unsaturated fat and solid fats, that can be an argument for the idea of a calorie isn't a calorie because of the way it makes you feel. But is it still 9 calories per gram? Yes. So there's an argument that certainly if you overeat any of the types of fat, you're going to gain weight. You can eat the healthiest form of peanut butter, natural peanut butter there is on the planet, and you can still gain body weight. Okay, it's just like eating a block of cheese, but the block of cheese might fill you up faster than the peanut butter would. Okay, because it's a solid food. That's the point. Let's move on to carbs. Carbs are obviously they're becoming less evil. They were evil for a while. They're really evil. Are carbs really evil? Do carbs cause you to gain weight? No more so than fat does. The issue is a couple things when it comes to as a calorie when it comes to carb. Number one, there's 3 different, at least general categories of carbohydrate: simple sugar, complex carbohydrate, and fiber. So if we look at 20 grams of carbohydrate and 4 grams are from fiber, that's a lot better profile than all 20 grams from a simple sugar, because fiber doesn't have energy associated with it. At least we don't think it does, right? And so you're only really getting net carb, right? 16 grams of energy producing carb as opposed to 20 if it's a simple sugar. Second, fiber will promote satiety faster. So think about what higher fiber foods look like: vegetables, fruit, right? Foods that have higher, oatmeal, okay, will have higher fiber in it and less will promote satiety faster. You'll feel full faster. And so while there's still 4, if we took let's say fiber was energy yielding, which it isn't. If it was 4 calories per gram, then yeah, it's still 4 calories per gram across the board. But the type of carb, in this case, more fiber, is going to promote, again, the feeling of being satisfied and stop eating, as opposed to drinking a drink that is 20 grams of sugar, like a fruit drink. You can slam a bunch of those and keep slamming them without really feeling full too quickly. Eventually the fluid volume will get you, but you could drink quite a bit. You could drink 60 grams of carbohydrate quite easily, but eating a food that had 10 grams in it and 50 grams of it, that would promote a lot of, you'd be done eating. So is a calorie a calorie? Yes. Does the quality of the calorie matter? Yes, it does. Okay. Finally, what about protein? So what difference does protein make as compared to the other macros? Now, certainly a higher fatty protein produces the quality of it. And again, I'm not advocating over-consuming saturated fat, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But a cut of meat that has more fat in it, has more calories in it, it probably is going to provide more satiety than something that doesn't. And so if you get a piece of meat that's extraordinarily lean, it may not be as satisfying. And so the tendency, the desire to overeat later may be higher. Okay. Now, I'm still advocating lean meat, 90% or leaner, right? Chicken, fish, even though it has high fat content, has a different kind of fat, right? Which again speaks to the different types of food and the quality of the food. But when it comes to protein, when you stack it up against other macros, the other two, the reason that most diets that are successful in weight loss, they have protein as the centerpiece. And the reason for that is because protein has two special qualities about it. Number one, when it's in solid form, it takes longer to digest, and so it expands the stomach. Stomach breaks down protein into its commensurate amino acids. And so when that process is occurring, it takes some time. And so that's going to promote a feeling of fullness. Now, if you drink your protein in, it's not going to be as fulfilling. However, whether you drink in protein or you eat it as a solid food, the energy it takes to deal with that protein, to break down that protein, is elevated compared to the other two macros. That's called diet-induced thermogenesis. And so protein has that special, unique ability. It's 4 calories per gram still, but it has that unique ability to cause more energy to be expended in order to digest it. And again, when it's in solid form, that's a double whammy in a good way, that it's going to promote satiety. And so is a calorie really a calorie? Of course. 4 calories per gram of protein, 4 calories per gram of carb, 9 calories per gram of fat. However, the way in which the calories are presented in the type of food that's consumed does play into how that calorie is metabolized, and behaviorally, how you deal with how you eat the food the rest of the day, if you might overeat or not. Those two factors then play into this idea that no, a calorie isn't a calorie. Okay. There's a balance between the two. All right. Now, how does this flesh out in a diet? Well, if you've kind of followed along with what I'm getting at, you'll see that it's really about the quality of food, the quality of your food. Okay. Successful diets usually run off of 2 things: higher quality food, which includes more fiber, okay, and then a diet that has protein as a central part of it, or at least as a significant part of it. Okay, if you do those 2 things, protein and fiber, you're going to get, you're going to have the opportunity not to overconsume because you'll be full longer. You're going to have a more micronutrient dense and more healthy type of foods that are part of your diet, a more fiber dense diet. That all spins up into a positive weight loss scenario, and controlling calories in, calories out. Even though the calories is a calorie, for the except for the exception of fiber, a calorie is indeed a calorie. The presentation of the food, though, is going to make a significant difference on how successful weight loss, and more importantly, weight maintenance will be. That old feeling of the old perception that healthy food is not enjoyable is also a fallacy, right? So, expanding your view of foods and realizing there's a lot of delicious foods and recipes and combinations of foods that use these higher fiber, higher protein diets, higher quality carb, right? Higher, different types of fat, but even just a little bit of saturated fat as well. The possibilities are endless. So I hope you found this video helpful. In determining this argument about is a calorie? Yes and no. Yes and no. Both sides of this argument have some validity, and put together, it makes a lot of sense then, what the final outcome is, which I just mentioned is the quality of food and protein. All right, I'll see you in the next one.